So it's a rainy day, it's definitely fall, and I need a bean soup. So I'm gonna make a kind of a Tuscan Italian sausage cannellini bean soup today, and I'm gonna take you through it. I'm Karen Kennedy with Real Food Matters. And this is one of those recipes where, people don't make it for themselves, but I always hear them say, someone would just make me this, I would eat it all the time. So I'm going to show you how to make it. It's super easy. I know I always say that, but it's because I don't make complicated things. I'm on a break from work. I finished with my clients about half an hour ago, took my dog out, and I need to leave in about 45 minutes because I have a meeting in town and I'm going to volunteer at my kid's school for an hour maybe, and then, dinner time. So this is all done on a break. So I'm going to get this in there and tell you what I've done. First, I chopped up a leek. This could be an onion, but I had a leek, so I'm going to use this. And I'm going to saute this on a medium pot with some olive oil in it, but it just so happens that there's more than olive oil in there, because you'll see this brown quickly. There's some sausage grease. And that's because before I did this, I browned a little bit of an Italian sausage. So before you turn this off because you don't eat meat, let me tell you how you can do this vegetarian, because you can. All right, just adding some salt to break that down. The first thing I did is I browned, and I did about a pound of mild Italian sausage. And this is part of my pork order. But you could also use the mild or spicy Italian sausage from Costco, and you could use anywhere from 2 to all 5 lengths of that. This does add some protein to it. It's really fatty. I don't mind that because this is going to be a really nice bean and vegetable dish, but it gives it so much flavor. It's mostly a flavor cheat. So if you want to do this vegetarian, you just need to build your flavor a little bit more carefully. Skip this part and just move on to building flavor with your vegetables. All right, so let's get a few more things in here. You don't have to add all the onion, the carrots, and celery, but whenever I'm making a kind of soup like this, it's just an opportunity to add more fiber, more plant nutrients. So I'm taking the last of my celery, and you can see it's the part with the leaves. This is the heart of the celery, and I like to use the really big, thick ones for snacks to dip, to put peanut butter or cream cheese in for my kids, and I save the hearts for soup because the hearts I think have a lot more flavor. They're great for soups. You can also use them as dippers, but I really like celery. And I'm chopping this up small because I want my celery, like my leeks, to disappear. So they're all going in there, and we'll get a little bit of salt in a moment. I have a couple of carrots. I'm going to use a different knife for my carrots. I find this thin Japanese knife to be a really good veg prep knife for these hard carrots, especially when I want to cut them up small. And so when I'm cutting my carrots up small, you see how I cut that lengthwise? And then I'm going to go lengthwise again. And if you had a really big carrot, you could go to another one. So I've got these nice little strips. Look at that. Just little cubes of carrots. Because I want my big chunks in this soup, I want to be those big cannellini beans and kale. Do you know what I mean? The white bean and kale soup. You get it at Olive Garden. What I'm replicating a travel food memory. How often do you do that when you're traveling? When I travel, that's when I'm the most receptive to new flavors and new foods. And I love them because I associate them with somewhere. And this was a trip, this particular trip. I got to spend a lot of time in Italy over the years, but this one, I was in Florence, traveling with my friend Joe. And this was in a restaurant. I remember one evening, and I just wanted to get a really simple dinner, so I got, the Tuscan white bean soup. It had some, of course, Italian sausage because we were in Italy. and some kale in it, and it was all white beans. And it was just one of those hearty soups that is just always good. High in protein, high in fiber. So I like to always put it in my routine. This time of year, hearty soups. There. So we have what my mother would call the trinity of onion, carrots, and celery. In my case, a leek, but a leek is an allium, like an onion, or a shallot, or garlic. There. And I'm going to let this cook down. So, how did I start this? I started it last night. You don't have to do it this way, but you know how I always like to cook my beans from scratch. And that's for a few reasons. One, it's more economical. I buy like 25 or 50 pound sacks of dried beans, and I keep them in metal cans in my shop. And I live out in the sticks, so that's part of my preparation thing, but then I don't have to go grocery shopping. So I just soaked about 4 cups of dried beans last night, and then I cooked that today. That's what this pot is. And look at this. This is where you get those creamy, soft cannellini beans. Can you see that? And it's already breaking down. And I cook them with a stick of kombu. Tell me you know what I'm talking about now. I'll get it out of the cupboard. Always, always, when I cook beans, I cook them with kelp or kombu because it helps the beans break down faster, but it adds so much flavor. Yeah, this kombu is really high in iodine and trace minerals, so you gotta have sea vegetables in your diet. You just got it. It's a great way to sneak vegetables in for kids or picky eaters, but also if you're on a vegan diet, that's where you get your trace minerals and iodine from. But kelp is also rich in glutamic acid. You know monosodium glutamate? Glutamate? That umami flavor? It's all in kelp. It's super high in glutamates. So I throw that in there when I'm cooking the beans or any stew, and it breaks down and it just adds that rich taste. So if you're doing this vegetarian, no pork sausage, and if you've been having those vegan soups and they're just like, it's lacking that sort of rich taste. It tastes too watery, even if you put all the salt in it, add the kombu. That's going to give you that umami flavor that's missing that you usually get when you throw a ham hock or a ham bone or sausage. Now, granted, sausage has lots of other spices in it, but that kombu is going to go a long way to giving your beans and bean soup a really rich flavor. And I learned how to flavor things cooking vegan years and decades ago, and now I just use those same things, and then I add those flavor cheats like Italian sausage, and now the food tastes awesome. So, you're getting your veggies nice and soft, and you've got your beans. Now let's say you're not into cooking beans, you don't have that kind of time, no problem. You open a couple of cans of cannellini beans, and when I say a couple, I mean like 8. Lots of beans, maybe 10. Maybe you get big cans of beans. But I like the cannellini beans. They are basically white kidney beans, so they're big and they're creamy and rich. So get some of those, open them up. If they have salt in them, you might want to drain them off. Not that I'm against salt, but it might throw your salt off. Do you know what I mean? Because also, we're going to have some homemade chicken broth. And if you bought chicken broth and that has salt in it, it altogether might just be too salty. So if you need to, you can rinse your beans off in a colander before you add them. All right, so my veggies are cooking. The next thing I'm going to do is put some garlic in there. I keep my garlic in this funny little container. Remember, when you use garlic, you don't saute your garlic with your onions and your other vegetables because garlic is high in sugars that will burn. Garlic is an aromatic like ginger, so put that in towards the end and you'll get all the flavor and it won't burn. Now some of you might be wondering, I see you're using your usual red pot on the stovetop, but could I make this in a slow cooker? And the answer is absolutely yes. You would still want to do this part in a pot on the stove. You wouldn't have to do it in such a big pot. But I like to saute my vegetables, and of course you'll want to brown your meat. That'll be all different in Instapot, but Instapots are their own beast. So if I was using a crock pot, which I'm not going to tonight, I would have my crock pot right here, and right now I would put my sausage in there. I would take my beans, and I would put my beans and the cooking liquid with the kombu all in there, and that I'd have that on high. If I was going to eat tonight, I'd have it on high. If I was making this for 8+ hours from now, I put it on low. And then what I would gradually do is when my vegetables are ready, I'd add my vegetables to the pot, and I'd add my chicken broth or vegetable broth to the pot and whatever herbs, and I'd set that outside to simmer. That's the only difference between using a crock pot and a stovetop. Okay, so next is my kale. And when you're going to add greens to things, you want to do this at the end. So it's what? It's 2 o'clock now. I need to leave in a half an hour. But when I come home, I want to be pretty close to eating. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to get my kale all prepped and cut up and ready to go into the pot, because I'll want it to cook for 10 to 15 minutes before I serve. So I don't want the hard stem. I already gave these a rinse in my salad spinner, so I just, that's it. Pretty easy. I bought this in the store because I'm giving my kale just a little bit longer to grow. I always try to grow this kind of kale in the fall so that it's ready, so I have greens all winter long. But look, what I bought already went a little yellow. I wouldn't use this because it tastes kind of mustardy and off. So I'm just going to strip all these. If you don't want to strip them, the other way you can do this is just to fold. You kind of fold it in like this, and then you can use your knife, one of your knives, and then just cut it just along the stem to cut the stem out. Okay, so you'll do that to all of your kale, and then what I like to do, you can stack them up, or just, I kind of like stacking most of them together in a flat pile, and then roll them up like a cigar. And this is how you do a chiffonade. This is a chiffonade. Can you see? Okay. I roll them up like this, and then I do thin cross sections so that I get ribbons of kale. Because I find people don't want a big hunk of kale to chew through, and then I turn that 45 degrees, and then I cut it again in nice little chunks of kale leaf. That's the kind of kale people like to eat. And then I'm serving in a bowl, so I've got these nice little ribbons of kale ready to go in, and they will take anywhere from, they'll probably take about 10 minutes to cook. So that makes it, from the time I get home, walk in the door, wash my hands, throw those in, set the timer 10 minutes, and we eat. Yeah, and that's really key to meal planning. And when I knew I was going to do this, I thought to myself last night, what am I going to have for dinner tomorrow? What is my day going to be like? When do I actually have time to prepare food? And that's how I meal plan. What am I going to have time to make? I knew I'd have about an hour right now, and I also had a little time this morning. So this morning, I drained my dry beans off that had been soaking overnight, and I got my beans cooking and simmering before I left to do my school run, and I went to school and did that. So by the time I got home from my school run and the gym, my beans were cooked, and I could just turn them off and set them aside. So while I don't actually have a lot of time to make dinner today, I knew I would have little chunks of time at, you know, first thing in the morning and then an hour later. Yeah, so I'm busy. I'm busy right up to dinner time today, but taking advantage of a couple little breaks when I know I'll be in the kitchen anyways, making lunch. There. So this gets set aside and it goes in a little bit later. All right, look at this. So that's really good. I'm going to add some dried herbs to this. Where did I put my dried herbs? I have some herbs de Provence around here somewhere. There it is. So I've used these before on my videos. Herbs de Provence, which is just an herb mixture with basil, oregano, thyme, rosemary, and lavender. And I don't have to go crazy because I've got the sausage in there, and the sausage is really where almost all the flavor is going to come from. If you're not using sausage, this is where you'll really want to fry your dried herbs. Build up your flavor. But if you're using the meat cheat with sausage, you don't have to worry about that much. You could even skip the herbs. You could even skip them. So now I'm going to turn my heat up because I was sauteing these on medium so that I didn't burn them. And now I'm going to throw in all of my beans with all of that broth. Oh, those look so good. So sometimes your beans don't cook down this much, and what you can do is you can take out like a cup of your cooked beans and blend them in a blender or with your hand blender so that you get that kind of milky, creamy beaniness. But these beans are really nice, and they cook down, and they're very soft. So I don't think I'm going to have to do that. It's going to be so good. And then I'm going to put in my sausage and all of that fat, because do you see the fat on here? That has so much flavor in it still. So it's all going to go in there. I'm going to bring this up to a gentle simmer. I'm going to cover it, and I'm just going to let it simmer on low the whole time I'm gone. It's going to be so good. Oh, I forgot something. Chicken broth. So I know, very attractive, frozen homemade chicken broth. But of course, if you don't have chicken broth, it's okay, because grown up that you are, you have boxed chicken broth in your pantry, or maybe in your fridge because you opened it and used some the other day. Put some chicken broth or vegetable broth in there. I always try to buy, I like the Pacific Foods bone broth, unsalted, so that because I like to add salt to my vegetables as I cook them to help them break down. So I just use this, and whenever I use chicken broth from the store, remember I always add a little bit of powdered gelatin to it. And you know what I like. I'll buy unflavored gelatin from Azure Standard in bulk. There's lots of good brands now. This Great Lakes gelatin is good. If you don't eat pork for whatever reason, a lot of these good, you know, they're collagen or gelatin, it's from beef, and you can get it really well sourced, like grass-fed beef. So you can get these kosher. If you're avoiding pork, you can still get collagen. And you can make Jell-O out of the same stuff. You can make Jell-O, pork-free Jell-O. That's good news to a lot of people. All right, so that's my soup. Can you see? It's very good. This is going to simmer. You know, this could simmer for a half an hour and then put the kale in and be good to go. But I'm going to let it simmer for 2, 3, it's going to be on here for 4 hours. I could put this in a crock pot. I'm not going to, but I really could have. But that's going to simmer, and like I said, 10 or 15 minutes before I eat, I'm going to add this bowl of chopped kale to it and let that until it's nice and soft, and then I'll adjust the salt and pepper in it, and it's going to be good to go. So that is my Tuscan white bean and sausage soup with kale, or Tuscan white bean and kale soup with sausage, or vegetarian Tuscan white bean and kale soup. I hope you try it. Thanks for watching.